a Flex R6 special interview all the way from California, Dr. Peter Cichonski. How you doing, Peter?
Ken, how are you, buddy? I'm great. Good to talk to you again. We miss you over here.
It's been a long time, and I can't wait to get back to the USA to get on stage and see all my friends there.
Absolutely.
You been well?
I've been great. Yeah, it's been a good winter. Just practicing, training.
Yep.
Using some blood flow restriction training, getting ready to hopefully hit some shows this year. Just keep the streak going.
Yeah, and very.
How about yourself?
Well, yeah, I'm going to try and do some shows here this year if I don't get COVID shut down with border closures, but we'll see how we go. But very topical, because today we are going to talk about the Be Strong blood flow restriction training method.
Absolutely.
And I understand you're an enthusiast, a learned user of the system, and a proponent, and you use it for yourself and your clients for muscle recovery, muscle repair, and obviously natural bodybuilding in the INBA.
Absolutely, and as well in my practice with recovery from injury. So there's many uses for the BFR blood flow restriction training, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are not familiar with the term blood flow restriction training. So I suppose we could kind of start there and give you a little bit of information on what it is. And so it's something that was developed literally about 50 years ago by a practitioner, a medical doctor in Japan, a Dr. Sato. Okay. And he was in his 20s when he actually had a ski accident. He broke his leg, and back then they just put a long cast on. It was a ski injury, and so he was messing around and trying to figure out. He remembered back earlier in his maybe a few years earlier in his life when he was at in Japan there's lots of ceremonies where you're on the floor, you're kneeling, and he was kneeling with sitting on his heels basically, and it was longer than normal, and actually by the time he got up, his legs were somewhat asleep, but he noticed the next day that his legs were almost sore, like he had gotten a leg workout.
Wow.
And yeah, and so he had never forgotten that. And so, being an inquiring mind, in his medical training, when he was injured and laid up, he had this idea that maybe there was something to that. So, he's laid up with a cast on his leg. So he used some elastic bands and actually put them around above his cast, above at the top of his thigh, and he did some isometric contractions. Obviously with a fracture you need to stabilize it and immobilize it, and so but being in the cast, he could still contract his quads and isometrically. And so he did this with these bands on. And, usually when you break a bone, you wear a cast, and then after about 3 weeks, you have to go in and get it changed because of the muscle atrophy that happens. And the cast gets too loose. And if it's too loose, it won't immobilize the fracture properly for it to heal properly. Yeah. So after 3 weeks, he went back and they noticed that it had not loosened, and he had told him what he was doing, and they thought he was a little out of his mind, even though he was already in medical training and he was kind of almost one of them. So they didn't change the cast, and 3 weeks later, after the fracture was supposed to be healed in 6 weeks, they went to take it off, and again there was no play at all in the cast. And so that was the beginning of his understanding that there was something going on. And he literally, once the cast was off, had very little to negligible atrophy in the leg that was immobilized for 6 weeks. And so he literally spent the next 20 to 30 years researching the phenomenon of what actually physiologically happens when you restrict blood flow while you use isometric contractions, or in the gym, any kind of resistance training, or even just general body weight training. And he came up with this system, and in Japan it's called Katsu, Kaatsu, I believe. And it's been probably 40 to 50 years before it was introduced into this country. And it was actually an orthopedic surgeon named Dr. Jim Stray-Gunderson who had his eye on this, and he actually went and was trained under Dr. Katsu to be able to understand this phenomenon and this principle. And Dr. Jim Stray-Gunderson, he's accomplished in his own right. He's a orthopedic surgeon. He's a researcher, and he works with the Winter Olympic teams, the U.S. Winter Olympic athletes in this country to this day. And he's worked with lots of athletes. And so they figured they would bring this technique to the United States through. They wanted to do it in a way that it would validate the technique. So they contacted Harvard Medical School, and what they did was they had a 6-week where they brought the trainers of Katsu to Harvard, trained the Harvard Medical School instructors, professors, because they were going to be doing a 4-day symposium, which I was part of this is about 3 or 4 years ago, and to explain this in this country so that it would be, a technique that would be looked at as a valid technique for injury repair, and overall health and wellness benefits, basically. And so that's how it all got to this country. And that was just in the last few years. That's why there's not a lot of information, but there's literally about 500 papers in the medical journals written about this Katsu training. And that morphed into what Dr. Jim Stray-Gunderson has developed, which is the B Strong blood flow restriction bands that, it's an offshoot of the Katsu, but they're much more user friendly, and you're able to take them to the gym, use them. They're very durable. They're extremely safe and ethical in the way that they're put together. So here we are. So we, and I started using them about a year ago, and now the question is, what are they, and what do they do, right?
Yeah.
So what helped Dr. Sato keep his lean mass when he had his broken leg, basically the physiology behind it is when you restrict and you don't occlude, okay, when you put a tourniquet on in a medical setting, in a surgical suite, you're occluding blood to the surgical site for obvious reasons, right?
Yeah.
But this is not that. And so you got to be very careful out there. There's some things there. You can go on Amazon and buy these blood flow restriction straps. You could use a Boy Scout belt around your, you could use all kinds of things. And I don't recommend that at all, because you really have to know what you're doing in that regard. Because most of those things,
measure of tightening, is it? You just tight as tight as you can get. You don't measure it as with the B Strong one. It's, exactly.
Right. The big difference is with a lot of these is those tourniquets, they're rigid. And so when you put them on and you start getting a pump, they don't expand with you, and you can really create a problem and occlude the blood flow to the limb, and that's something. It's a very dangerous situation that you don't want to mess with. These are designed where they actually, I have them right here. These are designed. They're elastic on the outside, and they have a bladder on the inside that you fill up with air. And so if you can see, there's the bladder is, they call it a barrel shaped.
Yeah.
So yeah. And so basically the principle behind this technique is when you restrict not arterial flow into the limb, but venous flow out of the limb, that restriction allows the blood to remain in the limb longer, yet you're using, so if you're going to do an exercise with the blood flow restriction bands on, as you know, in order for your muscle to work efficiently and properly, it needs nutrients, it needs oxygen, and it has ATP that needs to be released by the muscle. But an important factor for ATP production is oxygen. And so when you use the bands and you're going through a set, you run through the oxygen because it's not flowing. If you think of blood flow as a river flowing through the arteries into the muscles and then back into the veins and back out into the heart, then what you're doing is it's a lazy river, right? With the bands on, you're creating at the outflow a slowing of that process, so that when you are flexing, doing your workout, you run through your oxygen rather quickly. And so you start to get that burn, as everybody recognizes, right? When you start to that lactic acid buildup. And that what that does with the bands on is it does not allow that quick of an exchange, because every rep that you do, it's like a pumping action. So instead of a lazy river, when you are doing a bicep curl, let's say, when you curl up, that shoots some blood through the venous return, and so you're kind of stalling the process a little bit, and then you push some more blood out, a little more comes in. But you run through your oxygen rather quickly.
Yep.
And the real key is you can use these bands, and physiologically what ends up happening is, as you know, when your body recognizes that you're low on resources, it gives a signal to the brain that there's literally that you're working harder than you are. So with these bands, what you'll do is instead of using a maximal weight, let's say you curl 100 pounds, you'll literally use about 20 to 30% of that weight. But because you run through your oxygen pretty quickly, your physiology reacts as if you're using the 100 pounds, because that's what it would usually take to run through those resources that quickly. So there's a physiologic response that happens in your brain, right, that says, hey, we're doing way too much down here and we're devastating ourselves, so we need some help. So it'll send the recruits down. And that's where kind of the magic happens with these Be Strong bands, because you will get a release of resources from your brain, pituitary gland specifically, a release of growth hormone. That growth hormone will then be released to go and try to help repair what you just did. It will not only go to the biceps that you have the bands on, but it's a systemic release. So you'll get a response from the liver for some what's called IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor, to be released. You'll get an upregulation of protein synthesis in the muscles being used. You'll get a sensitivity to the cell receptors to use these resources. And you can do all of this in a manner that you didn't really break down or damage your muscles in the sense that your physiology thinks you did, but it will respond as such. And so you can use those resources to recover. You can use them. What you don't use is, growth hormone has numerous functions in the body. One being repair and recovery. Another being, it's called lipolytic. It will help burn. It's a lipolytic. It's a fat burning hormone. Yeah. So you can have access to these resources. And the way that I like to use the Be Strong, there's many different ways you can use them. You can use them on your own with just doing a full body workout in 20 minutes and it's almost a recovery workout, because you're getting all of these resources pumped through your system. Or what I like to do is I like to do 2/3 of my workout heavy, and a normal bodybuilding training session. But then I like, for the third exercise, I like to put the Be Strong bands on, and then if I'm doing bis and tris, then I'll do 3 additional sets of bicep, 3 additional sets of tricep. And the object is you want to use 3 sets of 30 repetitions with only a 20-second rest in between each set. So ideally, when you are trying to either get stronger or you're trying to build muscle hypertrophy, you have to tap into your type 1 and your type 2 muscle fibers. Typically, you have aerobic type 1, anaerobic type 2. When you train heavy, you don't usually get much of a lactic acid buildup or burn, so you never really fatigue those fibers that are aerobic to get to the anaerobic. So you don't really get a 100% complete workout and fatiguing of all the motor units that you can, right? Yep. In a workout that way. But if you train your type 1s, and then, by training heavier in, whatever you like to do, and then you put these on for the last third and do your same body parts with the bands on, you will now tap into the type 2 anaerobic, because you've already fatigued the type 1 pretty quickly from your first part of your workout. Then you put these on and you do your 3 sets of 30, and you maximally hit the type 2. That's when you get the maximal response from what we just talked about. And not only do you get an abundance naturally of all of those elements released, you get a quicker and speedier repair of all of those areas that you just trained. And so, if you've got the last issue of Iron Man magazine, that's where I have the article, blood flow restriction training, could it be the fountain of youth? Because literally you can be, we're in our 50s, right? I'll be 60 next year. I don't know. You're getting there too, right?
54, almost.
Oh, okay. You're getting there. So you can literally train. And even if you can't train as heavy as you once did, then you can maximally get the benefit of training like you once did using the Be Strong bands to maximally release all of these resources that you would have released in that kind of workout that maybe some people can no longer do.
Yeah.
And, so that's the big benefit from a training standpoint. But what resources you don't use, that's how you repair an injury. You see all these professional athletes, they get popped for performance enhancing drugs when they're coming back from an injury, because a lot of them will use growth hormone to speed the recovery of their injuries.
Yep.
And Dr. Gunderson, he has shown time and time again with Olympic athletes that they can get back to full speed much quicker. Let's say you break an arm, right? And now you can't perform, but if you can stay conditioned and you can recover quicker, then you can come back to sport quicker. And from any injury, you can literally put the band on one arm and both legs, and the arm that's broken, you don't worry about it, because you can then do a training session with your legs or with your one arm and get a systemic response of all of those anabolic hormones to speed the recovery of your injury, to repair and yet stay in shape. Conditioning, you can get on a bike and ride with the bands on. You can do anything that will, what you need to do for whatever sport you're in, or to try to maintain a condition, as opposed to having to sit on the sidelines.
Yeah.
So that's a major benefit of using this training system. And it's really he also calls it an anti-aging protocol, because growth hormone, is one of those elements that in order to be young, you need a good response of not only growth hormone, but an anabolic phase. And actually, ironically, in the next issue of Iron Man magazine, I have an article coming out. It's, from what I understand, it's going to be distributed to subscribers on April 12th in a couple of weeks. And then it's going to be on newsstands, at least in the United States. I believe Denise Keiko said on April 30th. And so I have an article in there entitled Mature Muscle and the Battle Against Age-Related Muscle and Strength Loss, and how to, fight that battle. And one of my strategies in there is using, this blood flow restriction training, because the older you are, there may be some limitations from prior injuries that limit people. But using a technique like this, you can maximally advance your recovery from a workout that, again, may not be as intense as a workout once was, but you will get a response as though you're doing such.
That's fantastic. I must admit, Peter, I used the contact form on the Be Strong website today and asked them, do they send their equipment to Australia? Because,
and they do.
I'm about to find out, but I'm convinced you've convinced me, because I'm going to purchase a pair. And the muscle recovery and injury repair thing really interests me. And like you said, old time injuries, which I've had for years and years, I'm going to use them and hopefully bring those back to where they were. Sending all those resources in, like you said. Now, what's the website we can get that from, the Be Strong products, Peter?
Well, and actually, they've given me, since I've been using them, it's I got it right here. It's www.bestrong.training.
Right.
Okay. And then if you give them, they've given me a discount code. I use them with my patients. It's Dr. Peter. It's just DRPETER. And you'll get 10%. You'll get 10% off and free shipping.
Dr. Peter, straight across, 10, no spaces.
No spaces, no period.
Excellent.
Yeah, and
That's good.
yeah, and I've actually had an athlete from the INBA, PNBA contact me from Australia, and they were able to send them over to her in Australia, and she loves them.
Perfect. Well, there's going to be two because I'm going to be the next one that's going to order some.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
yeah, they're totally amazing. I've been using them for a year plus.
Yeah.
And just an awesome part. So check out the article in Ironman in the prior issue if you haven't. That will give you more, or go on their website, bestrong.training, and there's lots of educational information on the website as well.
Yeah, excellent. That's fantastic, Peter. We might wrap it up there, and we might reconvene once I get my Be Strong blood flow restriction training bands. I've used them, and we can have a feedback session.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great idea. We got some video here too, so maybe we can do some demonstration.
Yeah, of course. That's great, Peter. Okay, have a good night, and thank you for your time. And Be Strong blood flow restriction training. Check out their website.
Check it out. Thanks so much, Ken. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
For sure, Peter. See you next time.
All righty.